Hello and welcome to this FireJumper Academy module on Secure Firewall. In this module, we'll be taking you through an example of how to demo the product. Chris will begin in the Firewall Management Center by taking you through some of the contextual information. He'll then hand over to me and I'll take you through the access control policy.
For this demonstration, we'll focus on the Firewall Management Center. A key FMC differentiator is the complete network visibility, which provides contextual awareness crucial to ensure protection. The FMC provides visibility into the constantly changing devices, users, applications, files, threats, and vulnerabilities that exist in both your physical and virtual network environments. It uses this contextual information to help prioritize alerts based on their relevance, allowing you to focus on the important security events as they happen. If we take a quick look at the main menu options, the FMC provides dashboards giving views into applications, security intelligence, threats, system status, connections, and files. Also, you can easily create your own custom dashboards. Under Analysis, you'll gain insights into connection events, perform threat analysis, and work with the FMC's contextual information. In the policies, you'll do most of the policy configuration items for the things like access control, intrusion prevention, SSL, and malware and file policies. Devices contain all of the device management functions for the managed secure firewall devices. And the objects is where the object management is done that can be used with policies and throughout your configuration. Let's look at the Context Explorer to gain insights into what is happening on the network at any given moment. By default, it shows all the information sent from your managed devices to the Firewall Management Center. You can enable filters to limit the view to various aspects of your network of interest, and you can also adjust the period displayed. For example, maybe you wanted to see what a specific user has been doing over the past week. It's worth noting that the Indications of Compromise section is the only part of the dashboard that is not affected by the time period selected. The indications of compromise remain in the dashboard until a security analyst resolves them. This section of the Context Explorer prioritizes security concerns based on the host. It helps you identify hosts in your environment with multiple indications of compromise. The pie chart on the left shows the various security event types that have been seen on your network. The event types range from intrusion events, including the impact score, file-based malware events, security intelligence alerts, and other indications of compromise. The bar chart on the right shows hosts and the number of indications for compromise of each one. Automated identification of hosts with multiple indications of compromise reduces security's analyst workload. The host-based activity that requires further attention is highlighted and prioritized. In all likelihood, most, if not all, of the attacks were blocked by the solution. However, the analyst still needs to know about what's happening to those hosts to determine if further investigation is required. A host that has seen multiple different attacks is likely to have an issue. The Network Information section gives a breakdown of the various operating systems connected to the network, top traffic by source and destination, and with user integration, it shows the top bandwidth usage by users. On a recent POV, we noticed two users utilizing far more bandwidth than others. Upon investigation, we determined they were running internet radio on their workstations 24/7 with the volume off when they weren't there. This network information view allowed us to find an opportunity to adjust user behavior to save some bandwidth. The Application Protocol Information section gives you a view into the protocols and applications running on the network. Each application is classified by risk, business relevance, and category. You can also toggle this view by protocol, client application, and web application. This section helps identify applications not expected on the network. We've seen it used in cases to find unsupported web browser versions or applications that aren't approved on corporate hardware. The Security Intelligence section shows security events by category from the threat feed supported by Talos. Talos provides security intelligence feeds for IP addresses, domains, and URLs. All of those feeds are continuously updated within the solution to provide the most immediate protection to your network. This section also shows the security intelligence events by source and destination IP. Intrusion information is shown with the breakdown based on the impact score. An impact score 1 event is the highest priority, indicating an actual attack against a potentially vulnerable target within your network. Impact scoring provides another level of automation within the solution that reduces security analysts' workload. FMC filters the thousands of intrusion events to highlight those of the highest priority. Your security analyst can focus on the events with the highest potential of compromise by looking at the impact score. Within this section, intrusion events are also indicated by top attackers, top targets within the network, and the top users associated with intrusion events. The file information section shows not only file-based malware, but also general information on the files traversing the network. You'll see the top files by type, the top file names, and which hosts are sending and receiving the most files in your network. On the right side, it shows the files by disposition and the top malware detected in the network. The file dispositions include malware that can be immediately blocked by the solution and unavailable, which are file types not defined within the file policy. The other file dispositions are known good and unknown. When the solution assigns these dispositions, it continually re-examines the hashes of the files to determine if there has been any change. One aspect of the solution, known as retrospective detection, allows us to see if a file disposition has changed over time from known good or unknown to known malware, in which case the system generates an alert. If you also have AMP for endpoints, retrospective alerts triggered by a malware disposition change would automatically be quarantined. Otherwise, a security analyst may need to take action to remediate the host manually. And by the way, the FMC can receive an AMP for endpoint alerts in the system to provide a complete view of the network and endpoint-based security events in your environment, all within a single management console. The geolocation information indicates the traffic to and from your network with other countries. The last section covers URL information, providing details by URL, URL category, and reputation. As you can see, reviewing the Context Explorer is a great way to see what's going on within your network over a period of time. It provides a good overview or starting point to determine if any action is needed to address concerns or adjust your security policies. As a security analyst, I like to start with the detailed dashboard. The widget at the top left shows intrusion events again broken down by impact score. You can see that there are thousands of events, but only a few are Impact 1 events. Remember, Impact 1 events are actual attacks against a potentially vulnerable target in your network. By passively observing the managed devices on your network, the solution creates host profiles for the areas of the network defined in the discovery policy. The host profile contains the operating system, ports, protocols, and applications running on the host. From this information, the solution can determine if the host is susceptible to an exploit. As mentioned, Impact 1 intrusion events should be a high priority for security analysts to investigate. However, we can take this one step further, as seen as the intrusion events requiring analysis widget. As you can see, the widget is configured to show all Impact 1 intrusion events that aren't dropped by the solution. Given that there are no events listed, it's an easy day for the security analyst. If there was an event listed, it would have successfully reached the target, as the system would have detected and alerted on an event, but not blocked the attack based on the intrusion policy settings. Therefore, the incident would require further investigation. Passively gathered contextual information is the key to providing these powerful prioritization capabilities. Indications of compromise and impact level scoring significantly reduces the security operations team workload and focuses their efforts on the events and security incidents that really matter. Let's have a closer look at the intrusion events. The table view provides specific event details and allows you to take direct action. Note the impact score, the inline results showing dropped, and the message detailing the rule that was triggered. With a right click, you can get the following options. If the analyst is unfamiliar with the rule, they can right-click and select Rule Documentation to get further details. The rule documentation provides information on the actual snort rule and the reference links about the vulnerability. You can also check if there are any known false negatives or false positives associated with the rule. The host profile provides the host name, the current user, and a list of other indications of compromise associated to the host. You will also see the operating system, ports and protocols that are open, applications that are running, as well as the malware and potential vulnerabilities of the host. Given that the vulnerabilities are determined passively, one way to increase the value of the host profiles and improve the impact scoring is by integrating with a vulnerability management solution. This integration updates the host profiles with vulnerabilities based on active scan results. Drilling down further into the packet view of the alert allows you to compare the snort rule to the actual packets captured. By default, the system captures the packets triggering the intrusion event. This allows analysts to understand exactly which packet conditions and content caused the rule to trigger. Also, you can download the packets for additional analysis if needed. Events may consist of single or multiple fragmented packets with each of the frames shown in the packet view for comparison. Now let's have a look at the file events. Network file trajectory provides details on how malware has moved throughout your network. It shows when the malware was first seen on the network and how it spreads. This includes the number of hosts impacted and which hosts are sending or receiving malware. When you select patient 0, then highlight the gear wheel icon to present details associated to the malware, where it came from, how it got to the host, and the user logged into that host. In the top left corner, you can see further details about the malware, such as SHA-256, the various file names used by the malware, the current disposition of the file, and the threat score. If you want further details, you can click on the dots beside the threat score to see the results of the dynamic analysis report for stored samples. From there, if you want, you can pivot into SecureX Malware Analytics to see the full malware analysis report.
Since version 7.2 of the Firewall Management Center, a new streamlined, redesigned access control policy interface was introduced. So if we navigate into policies and access control, so the first thing we see is a list of existing access control policies. Now we're in our dcloud demo environment, so we can see here we have our dcloud access policy. Now we can edit this and view it and see how it's made up, but as you can see here, we can't change it. In a production environment, this is where you could create new policies. For example, if I click on new policy there, I can give the policy a name. So we can call, policy maybe production, for example. We could put a description on there. We could select a base policy. So we could either use none for a completely blank policy, so we can start from scratch, or we can use an existing policy as the base policy so that we can reuse some of the components that might be in there. We can also choose what we want to be as the default action. So for example, block all traffic, which would be a typical default action for most kind of layer 3 firewalls. Also on the targeted devices, as you can see here, it shows a list of devices that are available to this Firewall Management Center. Now, we could, if we had 10 firewalls deployed, we could have 10 access control policies, and each access control policy would be assigned to its own firewall device. One of the big advantages and differentiators of the Cisco Secure Firewall, and particularly the Firewall Management Center, is that if we had those 10 firewall devices, for example, and they might be out at 10 different office locations, we could still have a single access control policy and have that policy deployed down to each of those 10 devices. So what that means is that we can have the same policy across multiple devices regardless of where they are. But then if we need to make a change and that change needs to affect all the sites and locations quickly, we can make that change to one policy, push the policy to those 10 devices, and we've just protected our entire estate from, the latest attack or the latest threat. So what we're going to do for this demonstration purposes, we're going to select the existing dcloud access policy. So here we can see we've got an edit option over here with the pencil icon. So if we click into there, that will open up and you'll see what is the new look access control policy. Now, if you're familiar with the previous version or you want to use the legacy interface, we have a switch up here that toggles it back to that legacy interface, and as you can see, it's a little bit more tabular, so you can see all of the columns that you would expect to see in a typical access control firewall, and that kind of scrolls down then and you can see exactly what's in there. Now, what we've done with the new user interface is we've tried to streamline this. So one of the first things you'll see up here is things like what we call the packet flow. So this is kind of where in the overall packet processing your rules are taking place. So you can see when a packet enters the firewall, it'll go through some things like if it's a VPN connection, it'll go through decryption. If it needs network address translation applying, it will go through NAT tables and so on. But then it comes into our things like our pre-filter rules. So we can do some fast pathing of traffic if we don't want to send traffic for advanced inspections, for example. We can also enable an SSL policy on here. So this allows us to decrypt traffic, whether that's full decryption so that we can see what's inside and make sure that there's nothing malicious in there, or we can choose not to decrypt traffic. So for example, if your company compliance says that you should not be decrypting your users' personal finance or their healthcare, then we can put rules in the SSL policy or the decryption policy for it not to decrypt those types of sites, and we can link that into our URL categories so that we can use those categories like finance or personal banking or healthcare, for example, so that if it detects one of those sites, then it won't perform decryption on there. The security intelligence tab I'll just click into quickly. So these are some of the feeds that we get from our Talos organization. So these are the known bad IP addresses. So you can see here we can do this based on networks. We can do it based on URLs, and we have known lists of kind of bad actors that we can apply blocks to. We can also say do not block list. So you can actually have a list that says, okay, if you see this IP address or URL or whatever it might be, then never block it, and it might be some trusted source from within your organization, for example. We also have DNS policies, and with the latest versions of Secure Firewall Threat Defense, if you have an existing umbrella DNS purchase, then you can link your firewalls now into your umbrella DNS policies as well. So we can have that kind of linked in here so that you can manage your overall DNS policy can be the same for your umbrella users when they're off-site, but then they get the same DNS policy when they're on-site and using a firewall threat defense device. We can also specify our identity policies. So again, if we want to do passive authentication, as we've got on here, we can say no identity policy. So we want to link in with our Active Directory, for example, so we can start to identify users and user groups. And then access control, that's where we do our main access control in terms of the rules that dictate what type of connections are allowed to pass or which traffic should be blocked, for example. Now, as you can see in this kind of new look interface, what we've done here, we've put the name and the action over on the left-hand side, and you can see we've got a bar down here, and essentially what that means, it's not a great example in this window, but I can scroll over here on the right-hand side, and what it would do is it would keep this kind of left-hand side static so that we could easily see which rules we were talking about and what was happening on them. If we wanted to quickly kind of insert a rule or add a rule, then it's very simple. If we know that we want to put a rule, for example, between rule 3 and rule 4, I can just hover my mouse in there and click on add rule, and it would insert a rule in there. If I didn't want rule 4 to be in this position, I could just simply pick it up and I could drag it and move it somewhere else in the policy. So we can drag and drop rules throughout the policies as well. One of the real advantages of the new access control policy are the kind of the bulk actions as well. So for example, by selecting the checkbox, so I select these two rules here, I get the bulk actions up here now. So from there, I can either copy those rules, send them to a different policy, move them in this policy, take a look at the hit counts to see how many times those rules have been used on a particular firewall or matched on a particular firewall. And I can also edit those rules, and that edit option shows me all of the actions that I can change for those two rules. Now, in this instance, I'm changing that for two, so I might want to say, actually, for these two rules, I want to apply a particular intrusion policy, for example. This is for two rules in this example. In your example, you could have 50 rules that you're doing bulk changes for. So again, this is about kind of streamlining the administration overhead and making these changes quick and simple. So we'll cancel out of there. So there's one of the advantages that we had in there. We've also got the ability to search as well. So we've got a filter option on here. So you can see here that I've just done a recent query. I've searched for a particular user. So if we click on here and I hit return, then that's just going to show me the rules that contain that particular user. And you can see that it's highlighted them there as well. So again, it's about finding objects, finding IP addresses, URLs, users, all that sort of thing, to help you zero in on the rules that you want to edit. So if I close that now, we'll go back to the normal view. I could simply, as I say, hover in and add rules that way. We can also add rules by clicking the Add Rule button, and then this allows us to give the rule a name. So let's say I want to create a rule now to block some Facebook activity. So what we want to do is, let's call this block Facebook chat, for example. Now I can choose where this goes. Now we can either say insert it into the mandatory section, and that will put it towards as the very last rule in the mandatory section, or I can actually be specific and say, actually, I want it to go above or below a specific rule. So let's say I'm going to put it below rule 3, for example, in this case. Now I want this to be a block rule. So you'll see here, when I change this from an allow rule to a block rule, we lose some of the options. I'll just quickly go back and change that to allow. You see, so as an allow rule, because I'm allowing the traffic to pass the firewall, it gives me the option to select an intrusion policy, for example. So if I want to do deep inspection, I can choose the IPS policy from here. If I want to, quickly go back on here. If I want to add a file or malware policy, again, I can edit that. And I can choose a file or malware policy that I've already created to look for vulnerabilities or exploits or certain malware, for example. But because this is a block rule, then those options aren't available because the traffic would be blocked, therefore there's nothing to send them. So in this case, we're going to say block. Now, from a source point of view, if I click on the source option, I can filter on absolutely everything that I have on here. So this takes in all of the components for these tabs. And as you can see, that list has gone quite long now. Or I can start to break it up into the various aspects. So I can say, okay, well, I want to go from a particular security zone. So a security zone is usually either a mapping to an interface or a group of interfaces. So in this case, I want to say I'm coming from the inside. So I'll add that to the source zone. And I'm going to the outside. So we'll add that to the destination zone. I'm not really bothered about particular networks, but if I was, I could use the geolocation and select particular countries, or I could start to type in network objects that are associated with my organization. Ports, again, I'm not too worried about, but we have all of the standard TCP, UDP ports and all of the well-known ports on here, and you can create your own and create custom ones as well. I'm going to be more specific. I want to use a particular application. So once I select the application tab, you can see here I can choose applications by risk, by business relevance, by the types of application and the various categories of applications as well. But I know in this case I want to block Facebook. So I can just type in there Facebook, and then we start to see the options that we have. So if I click on Facebook here, now I get all of the micro applications or the sub applications that are available. So I might not want to block, I want to block things like Facebook messages, or I want to block comments on things, but I still want to give users access to the wider Facebook page, but I don't want them to be able to post comments or messages, for example. So once I've selected those micro applications, I can now add them, and they get added as objects now to our destination zone. So if we now take a look at the rule summary, we can click back here. So you can see here it's a block. I could specify a time range to make this only ever active and during certain hours of the day. I've turned logging off, but I'll tell you, we'll turn on logging here now, and we'll log at the beginning of the connection because, again, because it's a block rule, it will never get to the end of the connection, so we just have the beginning option available to us. So now we can see that we have our logging on. It's a block rule. I'm coming from the inside zone and I'm going to the outside zone on this application. So when I click apply now, you can see that we have our rule that was bit inserted between rules 3 and 4. So my rule is now the new number 4 rule. And then you can see the block action, you can see the zone going from the inside to the outside and the groups associated with there. And that's how simple it is to create a access control rule. Once you've finished, you would click on save. And once you've made that change, you would then go to deploy your policy. Before deploying the policy, however, I wanted to show you how we enable the encrypted visibility engine. So in the More drop-down list, you can see we have our advanced settings. So if we go to advanced settings for this access control policy, this allows us to set some custom settings for the overall policy. So things like our TLS server identity discovery, for example, we can turn on here. We can specify things like how we want to handle elephant flows, so large packets on the network. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, just for the encrypted visibility engine, you can see here this is just a simple toggle. So I can turn this on and off by the toggle switch. And what encrypted visibility engine provides is information on TLS encrypted flows that are traversing the firewall. So typically a TLS encrypted session, the firewall isn't going to have any visibility of. The only way it could get visibility of is by creating a decryption policy and decrypting all of the traffic so that we can identify, exactly what's inside it. So what applications are being used, what IP addresses are communicating, is there any kind of malware or vulnerabilities associated with it, and so on. Now, what encrypted visibility engine gives us is the ability to identify the applications being used, but also identify if there's any malware in there as well. And we can do that without performing full decryption on that packet. So what that gives us is kind of an ability not to kind of consume more and more resources and take away the resources of the firewall whilst it's performing decryption. It gives us that kind of visibility into those encrypted flows without performing the decryption. So it's giving us kind of performance, but it's also giving us visibility. And then we can use that information to take policy decisions. So we might want to see if we detect malware in an encrypted flow, then obviously we would want to block that. If we detect a particular application that violates our corporate security policy with an encrypted flow, we can choose to block that as well. So this simple toggle button, it gives us that kind of visibility. One thing I will point out here is that you do need to have the IPS license or the threat license associated with this as well, so that you can run the deep inspection, and that's part of the capabilities that the encrypted visibility engine provides. If we quickly take a look in our unified event viewer, if we kind of scroll over, you can start to see, so these are the encrypted visibility log entries or columns that we can start to see on there. So if I, for example, just did a quick filter and looked for encrypted visibility threat confidence scores, and let's say I want to see, okay, show me the confidence where you've found threats you're 100% certain. If we apply that, that should give us then a list of packets or connections. So over here now you can see that encrypted visibility has got 100% process confidence score. The process name here in this particular example is a malware. The threat confidence is very high, and the threat confidence score is 100%. So it's determined that there is malware in this. And if we come over to the left-hand side, we can see that these connections were indeed blocked. So we can use that encrypted visibility engine to actually block threats as well within our security policies, and again without performing any decryption of that traffic. That brings us to the end of this demonstration. As you can see, that was just some of the functionality that the Firewall Management Center can do to help with both NetOps and SecOps teams. This session is intended to help you deliver a demonstration yourself. However, we recommend you make use of the dcloud instant demo to familiarize yourself with the FMC interface.